I'm the lead coordinator of the Transit Riders for Public Transportation National Campaign. My name is Fransisca Porchas. And I obviously want to talk to you today about our national effort. I'm going to go right into the program, what we're asking for. One is our overall frame for this reauthorization. As many of you might know, the Federal Transit Act has historically been Federal Transportation, not to be confused with transit because they're two different things, has historically been 80% for highway roads and freeways and 20% for mass transit. We want to, our overall frame for our program is that we want to actually flip this. We want ultimately to have an act that prioritizes mass transit, right? If we are literally going through the 6th extinction of species in the planet, because that's really what we look, how we look at climate change and global warming. The globe is 1 degree warmer, and that has created a lot of havoc thus far. And we must cap the greenhouse gases and how warm the globe is getting at 2 degrees. And so in order to do that, we can't have a bill that's 80% for roads. We can't. We must prioritize. Yes, we think we should preserve what we currently have, broken bridges, etc. must be fixed, but at the end of the day, we must invest in reducing auto emissions. Second, we really do want federal funding policies that restrict auto in cities and states, right? We have one of the greatest examples is we've been struggling for the last 5 years for bus-only lanes on Wilshire Boulevard. And finally got it. The federal government has finally approved the Very Small Starts funding, and now it's going through an environmental impact report process. So this is amazing. But our Wilshire bus-only lanes is a tiny, tiny example of what could be a county-wide bus-only lanes program, a countrywide bus-only lanes program to reduce auto and encourage more ridership, right? Seoul, Korea has almost 120 miles of bus-only lanes. That's where we want to be. To dedicate 50% of all transit funding to transit operations. Now what does this mean? It literally is the same thing. To operate the system. We need dedicated funding to operate the system. Little example, St. Louis, Missouri lost almost 50% of their transit service earlier this year. Almost 50%. That means 600 green jobs gone. That means that the most transit riders were hit very, very hard. In a time of attempting to do an economic recovery and 10% unemployment across the country, we really need to incentivize not only ridership, but we need to keep folks on the bus, and we need to help them find a job. We need to help them get to their basic needs. Just a little tidbit is that we want 50% of dedicated funds, right, from the transit pot. But Congressman Russ Carnahan is right now leading in a marker bill of HR 2746, where he's asking for anywhere from 30 to 50% of the transit pot to be used for operations. Not dedicated, but for there to be flexibility. So I guess it's a step closer, but it's still not what we want, but we're still encouraging all Congress to sign on to the bill. We have helped gather almost 70 signatures onto the bill. And lastly, well not lastly, but next, is that we want a federal mandate to reduce fares, right? When we don't have operations funding, that means fares go up. People don't usually connect it to that, but yes, we need operations funding to maintain fares very low, and we would like to see all fares to be cut 50%. If we're talking about a stimulus for the economy, that would be a great stimulus to keep money in people's pockets. This is just to give you an idea of the operations deficit as of mid-year this year, early this year actually. This was February figures. The deficit in operations of a lot of transit agencies. You can see Portland at 13 million to Sacramento at 18 million. Pittsburgh 17, so those are the lowest, even though it's still a lot of money. And then we have Los Angeles at 227 million. And then we have places like New York City at $1.2 billion of a deficit in operations. And what happens is the burden ends up being on the transit riders. A lot of sales taxes, a lot of fare increases, a lot of service cuts. We would like the preservation before the expansion. So one, we want money to operate the system, but we also want to make sure that we are maintaining the integrity of systems across the country, right? We're seeing in places like New York City where a lot of the rail lines are in decay, and yet they're choosing to expand more rail in different places, and yet the system's not operating to where it needs to be. And we see it across the city. So we want 50 across the country, 50% of all transit capital funding to bus as well. We want to see, at the end of the day, buses are still a lifeline for most people in this country. Especially in the Southwest, places like Houston and Dallas, New Mexico, Los Angeles. There is a vision for rail in the city, but at the end of the day, what gets people, 90% of the ridership is on the bus. And so we really need to see dedicated funding for bus, because we know that at the end of the day, many times local transit agencies don't make that choice, right? And jobs, right? So there's a whole, President Obama is going to be hosting a big job summit in December in DC, and we want to create jobs. So if we're talking about dedicated funding 50%, then bus manufacturing has been a dying industry in the United States. So one new bus order equals 8 to 9 jobs in manufacturing and supplies industry, 3 local jobs to operate, and 10 to 15 additional administrative jobs for bus orders. And number 5 is establish the private right of action to enforce the Department of Transportation Title VI regulations. So what the hell does that mean, right? That means that for 40 years, we have the right, and I mean the civil rights movement and environmental justice movement, transit justice movement, whoever, to sue any agency who was receiving federal funds and was using them in a discriminatory manner, and was causing a disparate impact on a certain group of people. That's what we use to sue MTA 94. We no longer can do that. As of 2001, that right has been chipped away. We want it to be reestablished. We want this federal act to be sort of a stepping stone toward the overall restoration. So the Department of Transportation has a civil rights department. I don't know if people knew that, and so does EPA, and so does the Federal Administration, Transit Administration. And so we want to be able to simply enforce the civil rights regulations that we were given in 1964. And a little bit of information is that there is a Congressional Black Caucus member who is willing to lead on this. That's as much as I can tell you right now, but very soon to some of you staffers, we will be reaching out for support, because we're hoping to make this a marker bill to include into the Federal Transit Act. And lastly, to include strict provisions to reduce greenhouse gases and air toxic emissions. So very, very quickly, where's the bill at, right? This is what we want. The bill right now is, there's an 800-page draft that the Transportation Infrastructure Committee has put together. And it's kind of stalled at this moment. It has been, like I said, it's reauthorized. It's every 6 years. Right now, its expiration date was in September, and it was extended till December. And there is conversations about being extended 18 months or being approved as soon as the year starts. So there's an internal debate between the administration and some of the members of the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, which I can tell you more about during the discussion. That's kind of where it's at. These are some of the folks that are actually making the decisions in the Senate. We have our own Senator Barbara Boxer, who's actually making a lot of decisions on the infrastructure side, roads, highways, and freeways. And then we have the House. We have Chairman James Overstar from Minnesota, and Chairman Peter DeFazio of the Subcommittee on Highways and Transportation Committee. These are people who literally have drafted an 800-page document. So, just lastly, obviously, we'd love for allies who are here to endorse. We'd love for residents who are here to get involved. And for any staff who is here, we will be reaching out to you for more support. Thank you.